Hey everybody, this is me, and once again, the Undead Viking. I'm here with another one of my how to build a campaign, or how to create your own campaign. If you haven't watched any of the preceding episodes of this, I believe this is going to be number 4. I invite you to do so. For those of you who've been watching these and waiting for number 4, I do apologize. Just with Easter weekend and everything else going on, I didn't have a lot of time. But the cool thing is that I'm probably going to do number 4 and number 5 like right after each other. So I should be releasing those pretty quickly. Anyway, so number 4, I remember I forgot what I was going to do for number 4, and then I remembered like as soon as the number 3 video was done. So this is my series about like what I do when I create a D&D campaign. Excuse me. It's not necessarily a D&D campaign. It could be for any role-playing game you have to be playing. These, since Dungeons and Dragons or Dungeons and Dragons type games are what I usually play when I play role-playing games, this fits into that mode pretty well, and then some of these episodes will work better than others. All that being said, spiraling back to number 4, which is races. Races in your campaign world. So races in your campaign world are can be all over the place. I can remember when I first started playing D&D with a lot of people when we played, and still to this day, like certain role-playing systems like Labyrinth Lord use this. They use like there's fighter, magic user, cleric, thief, and then like there's the races that are the classes. They're like the dwarf, the elf, the halfling. If you played with the old basic expert, what was it? Basic expert. What was it? It was something between. It was like, and then went to master, and then it went to like immortal. What was it? Because it's back me. No, it's beck me. Because it's basic expert. C campaign. Campaign. God, why can't I remember this? But yeah, it's called beck me because BECMI was the system. But anyway, that was the system back then. The races were were classes, and I can remember like when we used to play D&D, and this is like way back in the day, right? Because I started playing in the 70s. When we used the old basic set or whatever, the characters rarely gained levels, and also as kids, you kind of just wanted your character to be powerful. Like everybody played an elf. Why? Because you fought like a fighter, and you got to cast spells like a mage, and you got to wear armor. So it was like the best of both worlds. And nobody ever played a dwarf. Nobody ever played. You always stuck one person with being a thief because you needed one, right? You needed somebody to find the traps. But for the most part, everybody would just be like, yeah, I'm going to take an elf, so I can also cast sleep, which was the spell I already cast, and then I can also attack with my sword. But anyway, funneling all the way back to where I'm going with this is races. So this is going to be systems that aren't like Labyrinth Lord or Beckmean or things like that, where you're going to have different races that your players can be. And this is not non-player character races. I mean, I'll touch on that here in just a little bit, but this is player character races. So when somebody creates a character, what race they can be. And then the video following this is going to be talking about classes. So like obviously this is fairly important because they kind of go hand in hand. Anyway, so when it comes to races, you could put zero thought into this and just roll with it. If you're running in any particular rule set that you happen to enjoy, you can just say whatever's in that rule set is available to you. I mean, Pathfinder has a perfect, set of races you can play. D&D 5th edition has a perfect set of races you can play. There's no worries there as far as that's concerned. Those things have been play tested, troubleshot, and whatever, and they've stood the test of time, right? I mean you have your class of races. You have human, obviously, dwarf and gnome, so you have the dwarf, the burly dwarves, and the kind of smaller gnomes, it's like, I live in the mountains, I live in the hills, but we both are weird and shorter than human beings, and we have our own little crazy things that we do. And then you, of course, have elves, and then you have half-elves, which, I think back, I mean, I can remember back in AD&D when we played that, like, almost everybody was a half-elf. Because you kind of got some of the good stuff, like being able to see in the dark. You got some of the sleep and paralysis, the sleep and charm. Sorry, not paralysis. You got some of that weird sleep and charm ability to avoid, and and more importantly, half elves could be pretty much any of the multi-class options that you had in old AD&D, which ultimately was like one of the best things to do. Being it was just one of those things where it's like you were behind a little bit, when you raise levels, but you were never that far behind. And being like a fighter thief or being a fighter cleric or a fighter magic user, it just worked better. But anyway, regardless, I'm kind of touching into classes right now, and I don't really want to get into that. What I was getting to was the fact that like elves and half elves, and then of course you have third edition. Really, I mean, they were available and they existed in AD&D, but nobody really played half orcs that much. But half orcs kind of came into their own, if you will, with third edition and Pathfinder, and they were seen as a really good option. I mean, one of my when I DM'd a campaign, an old 3.5 campaign, one of my favorite characters in that campaign, somebody had a half-orc paladin, which I thought was really cool. And it was just like kind of a cool concept for characters. So I thought half-orcs really came to the forefront. Now, there's other weird races that got added later that I wasn't so much a big fan of. I was never a big fan of all the weird stuff that got added, like the tiefling and those things. I was never, and now there's the dragonborn and stuff like that. I'm not a big believer in the weird races. I just think that kind of I don't know, it just if you've watched these things and if you've listened to me talk on the weekly show, the Owl Boom, every Wednesday night 9 p.m. Then when it comes to RPGs, I'm kind of a purist. It doesn't mean it's better, it just means it's what I like. And if you and your players really love playing whatever it is that you're playing, then, hey, rock with it, roll with it, and enjoy the heck out of your RPG. It's just not my style, baby. So regardless, the big thing is that what you're going to want to do, in my opinion, what you're going to want to kind of make up your mind when it comes to your races is that pick a set that you think are going to work for you, but don't just, in my opinion, you're kind of missing a golden opportunity to really breathe a lot of life into your campaign world if you take a moment and come up with backstories for those races as to why they are, what they are, and so forth. And if you want to, take a little bit of time to, diversify the races a little bit. I mean, there's entire books that are about all the different kinds of dwarves there are, all the different kinds of elves there are, all the different kinds of gnomes, and so on and so forth. You can just have some fun with it. And also for that matter, you can have some fun with the humans as well. And just as far as the different types of humans, you can have the barbarians of the north, and you can have the well-known but swarthy traders of the inland seas and things like that. And just like our world right now has many different cultures and your genetic makeup of humans, you can definitely have some fun and rock with that and change it up. And once again, when you add more and more detail into your campaign world and have some fun with it and take some time to write some stuff up and present that to the players, it adds a lot to the the reality, the realness, the verisimilitude, as I say over and over again, of the world, and it adds a great deal to that. And trust me, it might be something like my last campaign that lasted like 2 years or 3 years or whatever it was. Like, there were two types of elves. There were the sun elves and there were the moon elves, and like I kind of made a like and like they were both like elves. They still had the same like things to them or whatever, but they looked drastically different. The sun elves tended to have darker hair and they had tan skin, and they were they just were more by nature, they were more gregarious, whereas the moon elves were just like very secretive. They had very pale skin. They had very very, very light colored eyes and things like that. And so it was just one of those things where players got to choose if they wanted to be a sun elf or a moon elf. It was their choice what they wanted to do if they happened to play an elf. And and the same thing when there were stone dwarves, and I'm kind of going on and on about it. It doesn't really matter what my campaign has, but it just kind of lets you know that you have those options, you have those abilities. Now, the thing is that if you really want to dive in, start messing with the what the crunchiness of it, the actual like game mechanisms part of it when it comes to those different races. Change up what they make like. You could decide, these dwarves have been a very sedentary race. They don't get as big of a bonus to their constitution, but they're well known for trading. So you take maybe you give them a bonus to their charisma, something that dwarves aren't really well known for. You can start messing with these things and start changing things up and kind of spin the game tropes on their ears. And and just kind of throw your players for a loop, and that just will kind of also, once again, it kind of claims that world as your own, and you can roll with that. Now, this is all stuff you should like detail greatly and present it to your players. Obviously, if there's secrets behind certain races, you want to keep those unless the players are part of that race, or unless the players should have a knowledge of that race. Just because you are an elf doesn't mean you know all the secret of the elves, right? But you can know that. My most recent campaign that I'm playing in right now, for like the longest time, we the non-elf players in the campaign world, and of which there were like 2 or 3 of us, but then there were 2 elves. The 2 elves every once in a while would basically get taken to another room and be told certain things that were very important to their race, because there's a lot of secrets behind what was going on with the elves in the world. Eventually those became known to us, but for like a good 5, 6, 7 months, and this is about 15 or 16 sessions in, there were like a lot of things that were going on that we had no idea, but the elves couldn't share with us because they weren't allowed to. And so stuff like that can be part of the world as well. Now, you have the option, if you said, like spin things against their tropes. A long time ago, my buddy Jason ran a campaign where he made the gnomes, he called them the sea gnomes. And he actually, the gnomes weren't a race that lived in the hills or whatever. They were known for their technological advancements when it came to sailing and ships and powered ships, in fact. Now, not like tinker gnomes, like creating steampunk ships or something like that, but using magic to power ships on the ocean, not fly around, but on the ocean. And they were the sea gnomes were well known as pirates and raiders and things like that, and they were a feared race. And they were also a race that we couldn't choose. We couldn't choose to be a gnome, but eventually we did run into them, and we had a lot of crazy combats with them. Someday I'll talk about. Someday I want to tell the story about that campaign. That was a really good campaign. But regardless, the big thing is that just have some fun and change things up. For example, my most recent campaign that I'm working on right now, I'm coming up with this idea of the dwarves being like the dwarves are always mentioned as being xenophobic and phobic, I guess I should say, and being untrustworthy of outsiders. But in this most recent campaign idea that I've tried to make I want to make the dwarves mega rich, super rich, ridiculous. When people see dwarves, they never see a dwarf not wearing like the finest in clothing. They don't never have nothing but the finest weapons. They never have nothing but the finest armor. And like and just allowing players, I mean, because and there's a lot of factors. One, I worry about giving away too much, so I want to say a lot, but there's a reason for that. And I'm going to allow players to be dwarves, and they kind of have a knowledge of those reasons and what have you. But I want them to be like kind of seen as, you know, that snotty upper class, and I want people to like look at dwarves that way. And it's one of those things where like I have an idea for that, and I have an idea what the reason for it is, and I think it'll just add to that world. I did a campaign many years ago where the elves were the bad guys. You know, elves are always thought of being these noble creatures and like, you know, maybe a little aloof, you know, and what have you, but also like power for the force of good. And like, you know, I understand, you know, we've always had those things, we're playing a drow and all these things, and the drow with the heart of gold or whatever, or whatever you want to call it. I don't care. I say drow, it doesn't matter. My big thing with that is that I actually just, you know, the elves were just, I kind of took the old Grugach, the wild elves, and they basically like the other races were seen as invaders to their homeland, and so they actively hunted and killed humans, dwarves, gnomes, anything they possibly could, and they were actually the bad guys. And there was like, and it was just, and once again, it was like players couldn't be elves. You know, there wasn't any like elf with the heart of gold, you know, that wanted to help or anything like that. But I mean, it was just something that I added to the campaign and kind of changed things up and made it different and made it my own, if you will. And I think that's the biggest thing too, is make it your own. And this is, like, as I said, if you don't want to go through with the whole process of just like, you know what, just any race you want out of the book, go ahead and take it. If you want, but I just find, I think you'll get more satisfaction out of like creating your own world and creating the options in your world and limiting your players and you know, get players out of their comfort zone. You know, if you've played with the same group a lot of times, you'll see your players will tend to gravitate towards certain races, certain classes, if you will. There's a person in my group, my buddy Craig. He almost always plays a dwarf. It's one of those things that, like, when he doesn't, it's really weird. I mean, but if you can come up with a reason, come up with an enticement for your Craigs, you know, that you have in your, and to get them to not be a dwarf, make them interested in something else. You know, and this will go hand in hand with the thing about the guilds. It'll help out a lot, and it'll you know, get them out of maybe their rut. And now, I mean, saying that, if the players are just going to be happy playing the thing that they play, then let them play what they want to play. But just you can help out a lot. You maybe, like I said, get them out of their comfort zone, have them experience something different, you know, and roll with it. So that's that. And and the other thing is that I remember a long time ago, like there was, and this was for AD&D, they actually put out a book. I think it was like Monstrous PCs, I think was the name, or Monstrous Player Characters, whatever it was. And they basically gave rules in that book, and it was a great book. They gave rules in that book for players to play like non-norm races. So there are rules for if you wanted to be, you know, if you wanted to be like an orc or a hobgoblin, or if you wanted to be a half ogre, or things like that, then there were rules for it, and they would, you know, and you could play that way. And I remember when we first got that, we totally dove into it, and we played a lot of it, and we liked it. Eventually I ditched it, just because it kind of, you know, made people a little bit too powerful. I do remember in one of my old AD&D campaigns that ran for a long time, my buddy Phil, you know, played a Flind, which is that weird gnoll, like the more powerful gnoll, if you will. He played a Flind assassin, and I remember he had a charisma of 3. Because, like, when he rolled up his stats, he got a charisma of 5, but Flyns had a -2 to charisma, so he had a charisma of 3. And so he just he just wore a cloak wherever he went, and that actually became his name. He just didn't have a name; his name was just Cloak, and it was really brilliant actually. Now thinking about that character, I mean, and yeah, he was cool. But anyway, the point is that I kind of got rid of that. But if you want to have non-canon, non-norm options for your races, then yeah, go for it. I mean, do it. Just make sure they're balanced. Just make sure they work, and just make sure that like a lot of people forget about the negatives that come with like if you have something that's powerful mechanics wise, it should be evened out in some way. Because there should be a reason for your characters not to want to play that character. For example, when your characters are thinking about playing, like you know, say like they were playing a race. I'm not picking a race, but if they had a race that had, you know, +4 to strength and +2 to dex and +2 to intelligence. I mean, something ridiculous, right? And they could also fly or something. You know, something ridiculously good. Then it should be something ridiculously bad as well that exists for them. And maybe not even totally mechanics-wise, but like it could be something that they're just seen as a monstrosity, and they aren't allowed in towns. They aren't allowed to speak to other people. I mean, if people were to see them, they'd want to murder them on the spot, that sort of thing. And actually have that be a game specific reduction, if you will, disadvantage. So you know, it would be something that they'd have to get by, they'd have to work with, and then have to play. So yeah, so there you go. So when it comes to races, like I said, the big things are make sure, like, you know, if you're not going to go with like just the stuff that's right out of one of the books, make sure that they're interesting. Make sure that you spin the tropes a little bit on their ear. You know, change it up. I mean, why do dwarves have to live in mountains? Dwarves can live in forests. You know, it's like elves. You know, could live underground. You know, they don't have to be drow either. They could just be, you know, elves that for whatever reason live underground now. You know, maybe they're albino elves and they go there to, you know, be out of the light and stuff. But yeah, so have some fun with it. Change it up, and most of all, like I said, make those your own. So there you go. That's what I do when it comes to races and how I play. If you have any comments about like what you do with the races and your campaign worlds that you create, I'd love to hear them. If you have like anything like, you know, like a certain, like maybe a character you played and the race was something out of the norm that you kind of tried and you win against the grain, I'd love to hear about that too. And if you make your own campaigns and you've even like created your own races or stuff like that, I'd love to hear that stuff as well. As always, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. I do apologize, as I said, you had to wait a little bit for this one. But like I said, I'm going to make up for it by having the other one like release pretty quickly after this one as well, since I'm filming it right after I get done with this. But, you know, there you go. Yeah, as always, be the best version of you possibly can be. You're awesome. I'm the Undead Viking. I'll catch you with the next video.